The crystal halls of the warship hummed with power as Ambassador stood before the view screen, watching the small blue planet grow larger. Earth, the humans called it, such a plain name for what should have been their next conquest. Behind him, his security detail shifted their massive frames, their diamond-hard skin catching the light like prisms. They were warriors bred for battle, standing 8 feet tall with natural armor that could deflect energy weapons. Their strength could crush steel. Felt confident. 40 star systems had fallen before the hegemony. 40 different species had seen their fleets and chosen submission over death. The humans would be no different. The preliminary scans showed them to be weak creatures, soft-bodied and fragile. Their skin could be pierced by simple projectiles. Their bones broke under pressure. They had no natural weapons, no claws or venom or armored hides. They were prey animals who somehow learned to build ships. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, landing at what the humans called Geneva, outside their United Earth Council chambers. Emerged into the alien air, his guards flanking him. Human soldiers stood at attention, small creatures wrapped in fabric uniforms, holding primitive kinetic weapons. They barely reached his chest. He could break any of them with one hand. Inside the council chambers, human leaders sat in a semicircle. They wore suits of cloth, not armor. Their faces were soft, showing every emotion. Weak thought. Everything about them screamed weakness. "I am ambassador of the hegemony," he announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. "We have claimed 40 systems through strength and will. We offer you a choice. Submit to hegemony rule, retain your culture and limited autonomy, or resist and be eliminated. You have one planetary rotation to decide." The human who spoke for the council was an older female with gray hair. She smiled, which confused. "Ambassador, we appreciate you traveling all this way, but Earth's answer is no. We will not submit to foreign rule. We'd be happy to discuss trade agreements or cultural exchanges, but sovereignty is not negotiable." Felt his crystalline skin heat with anger. "You do not understand. We have destroyed species far stronger than yours. Your military is nothing compared to our fleet. This is not a negotiation." The human woman's smile never wavered. "Then I'm afraid we have nothing further to discuss. You're welcome to remain as a diplomatic guest, but the answer remains no." The audacity stunned him. Stormed from the chambers, his guards following. This was unprecedented. Even the warrior species of VII had recognized their inferior position and negotiated terms. These humans, these soft little creatures, simply said no as if they had any chance of survival. Back aboard his ship, prepared his report for the Hegemony War Council. But first, protocol required him to review the species' historical database. It was standard procedure, usually boring. Most species had simple histories of slow technological development and occasional territorial disputes. He accessed Earth's public archives and began reading. Within minutes, his confidence began to crack. The humans had been fighting for their entire recorded history. Not occasional conflicts over resources, but constant, continuous warfare. Wars lasting decades, even centuries. Wars between religions, between nations, between ideologies. Wars fought over land, over honor, over insults. The sheer number overwhelmed him. Hundreds of major conflicts. Thousands of smaller ones. The humans had spent more time fighting each other than any species he'd ever encountered. But it was the details that made his blood run cold. He read about something called World War I. Millions of humans had died in just 4 years, fighting in muddy trenches, breathing poison gas, being torn apart by machines designed solely to kill. The weapons were horrifying. Flamethrowers that burned soldiers alive. Artillery that could destroy entire sections of battlefield. Poison gas that melted lungs. And the humans had continued fighting anyway, for years, even as entire generations died in the mud. World War II was worse. 50 million dead. Cities burned from the sky. Entire populations targeted for extermination. The humans had built factories whose only purpose was building weapons to kill other humans. They had drafted their entire societies into war efforts. They had invented weapons that split atoms, creating explosions that vaporized cities and left the very ground poisoned for generations. His hands shook as he read. The hegemony's worst battle had killed perhaps 10,000 warriors. These humans had lost millions and continued fighting. They had a term for it: total war. The complete mobilization of society for the purpose of destroying the enemy. He dove deeper into the archives, unable to stop himself. The humans had been creative in their violence. They had weaponized diseases, creating plagues to unleash on enemies. They had developed chemical weapons so horrible that they banned themselves from using them because the results were too cruel even by human standards. Too cruel. The phrase haunted him. What did it mean when a species set limits on its own capacity for violence? The Geneva Conventions appeared in his research. Rules of war, the humans called them. Lists of things they agreed not to do to each other. Don't torture prisoners. Don't target civilians deliberately. Don't use certain weapons. Realized with growing horror that these weren't rules for fighting aliens. These were rules humans made to limit how they fought each other. They had been so efficient at killing their own kind that they needed regulations to maintain some basic level of civilization. But the truly terrifying part was how often they broke their own rules. Time and again, the archives showed humans violating their own conventions when they deemed it necessary. They had concepts like acceptable casualties and collateral damage. They calculated how many of their own people could die for strategic objectives. They built weapons of such power that using them would guarantee their own destruction, and they built them anyway, betting their entire species on the threat alone. Found recordings of human conflicts. He watched footage of soldiers charging into gunfire, knowing they would die doing it anyway. He saw bombers flying into enemy ships, sacrificing themselves for minimal tactical gain. He watched humans fight in jungles, in deserts, in frozen wastelands, in the ruins of their own cities. They fought when victory was impossible. They fought when surrender would have saved lives. They had a word for giving up everything to spite an enemy: scorched earth. They would burn their own lands, rather than let an enemy have them. The most recent major conflict was called the Resource Wars. Fought just over a century ago, it had been a global struggle for water and rare earth elements. 70 million dead. Entire regions made uninhabitable by chemical and biological weapons. Automated war machines that hunted humans without mercy. The humans had built artificial intelligences designed to kill more efficiently. They had programmed machines with the sole purpose of ending human lives as quickly as possible. And then they had stopped, united, formed the United Earth Council, read the treaty documents with disbelief. The humans hadn't stopped fighting because they were tired of war. They stopped because they had nearly destroyed themselves and realized they needed to direct their violence outward, not inward. They had looked at their own capacity for destruction and decided it was better to be allies than enemies. Pulled up Earth's current military data. Their space fleet was small, just 87 ships, but when he examined the designs, his heart sank. These weren't exploration vessels retrofitted with weapons. These were warships built from the ground up, incorporating every lesson humanity had learned from 10,000 years of killing each other. The hulls were designed to absorb damage and keep fighting. The weapons systems could operate independently if the crew died. Every ship carried enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. More terrifying was what he found in their defensive network. Humanity had militarized their entire solar system, hidden weapons platforms on asteroids, nuclear mines drifting in seemingly random orbits, automated defense systems that could operate without human input. Luna, their moon, was essentially a massive fortress. Mars held garrison forces. Even their civilian stations had military-grade weapons hidden in their structures. These weren't the preparations of a peaceful species learning to defend itself. This was the work of a species that had spent studying warfare as a science and had simply applied that knowledge to space. Research revealed something else that chilled him. Humanity had only stopped fighting itself 150 years ago. Before that, They had been hundreds of separate nations in near-constant conflict. They had achieved space flight while simultaneously maintaining enough nuclear weapons to destroy their own planet dozens of times over. They had reached the stars not through cooperation, but through competition, with different human factions racing to claim space before their rivals. Every human advancement had been forged in conflict. Their computers were originally designed to calculate missile trajectories. Their rocket technology came from weapons programs. Their medical advances came from treating battlefield injuries. Even their internet, their global communication system, was originally a military project designed to survive nuclear war. Composed his message to the Hegemony War Council, his hands trembling. Urgent. Abort invasion immediately. Species classification grossly inaccurate. Humans are not prey species. Request immediate diplomatic reclassification and full military threat assessment. They have fought continuously for 10,000 years. They have weapons we cannot defend against. They have tactics designed to kill at any cost. Do not engage. He sent the message and waited, knowing in his crystalline heart that it was already too late. The War Council would see his warning as cowardice. They would look at the numbers, 87 human ships versus 200 warships, and see an easy victory. They wouldn't understand until the shooting started. Looked at the blue planet below and whispered a prayer to the old gods of his. He prayed that the hegemony would listen. He prayed that they would retreat. But most of all, he prayed that the humans would show mercy, because nothing in their history suggested they knew how. The Armada emerged from faster-than-light travel near Mars, their 200 warships arranged in the traditional conquest formation. Admiral or stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Conquest, his crystalline skin glowing with anticipation. This would be a quick campaign. 3 days, perhaps 4, and the human would surrender. The fact that the humans had refused the initial diplomatic offer only made the victory. Or had read panicked warning and dismissed it as the ramblings of a diplomat who'd spent too long reading primitive history texts. So the humans had fought amongst themselves. Many species did. It meant nothing against the organized might of the hegemony. His ships had shields that could withstand sustained fire. His weapons could crack a planet's crust. His warriors were bred for combat. What could these soft creatures do against such power? The human defense fleet appeared on sensors. 87 ships, just as intelligence had reported. They were smaller than warships, their designs utilitarian rather than impressive. They formed a loose defensive screen between the Armada and Earth, clearly hopping to buy time for evacuation or surrender negotiations. Or opened a channel. Human vessels, this is Admiral or of the hegemony. Your planet has refused submission. Stand down and you will be permitted to evacuate. Resist and you will be destroyed. You have 10 minutes to comply. The response came immediately, a human voice, male calm. Vessels, this is Fleet Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered a weapons-free zone. All treaties and conventions of civilized warfare are suspended. Compliance is not optional. You have entered a kill zone. Retreat immediately or we will interpret your presence as an act of war. Or laughed. The human actually thought he could threaten the hegemony. Fire on the nearest human vessels. Show them what resistance costs. 3 battleships opened fire. Energy beams crossed the distance in seconds. 3 human ships exploded, torn apart by weapons designed to destroy fortified positions. The other human vessels didn't retreat. They accelerated forward, directly toward the fleet. Or frowned. This wasn't standard defensive doctrine. Ships were supposed to fall back when taking casualties, regroup, form a defensive position. The humans were charging into optimal firing range for his weapons. It made no tactical sense. Then the human ships opened fire, and Or realized his mistake. The weapons the humans used weren't energy-based. They were kinetic projectiles, firing solid slugs at relativistic speeds. The rounds punched through shields like they weren't there. One battleship lost its entire starboard side to a single volley. Another spun out of control, its bridge section simply gone. The human ships fought like nothing or had ever seen. They didn't maintain safe distances. They closed to point-blank range, their weapons tearing into hulls with brutal efficiency. When a human ship took critical damage, instead of retreating, it would accelerate toward the nearest vessel and detonate its reactor core. 3 human ships died in suicide runs within the first 10 minutes. They took 5 battleships with them. Or ordered his fleet to spread out to use their numbers advantage. The ships were superior one-on-one. They just needed to avoid letting the humans get close. That's when Earth's hidden defenses activated. Asteroid mining stations revealed themselves to be weapons platforms. Nuclear mines that had been drifting for decades suddenly activated, their drives pushing them toward ships. Automated defense drones, thousands of them, swarmed from hidden bases on Luna and Mars. They were small, fast, and carried just enough explosive to cripple a warship's engines. The formation dissolved into chaos. Ships tried to maneuver, but the humans had turned the entire inner solar system into a maze of overlapping kill zones. Wherever the vessels moved, they found weapons waiting. The humans had clearly spent decades preparing for this exact scenario. Or's tactical officer shouted reports. "Admiral, we're being hit from multiple vectors. The human ships are using kamikaze tactics. We've lost 17 ships. No, 21, 23. Admiral, they're not retreating. Even damaged ships keep attacking." A cruiser nearby took a round through its engine section. The ship began to drift, powerless. The crew activated distress beacons, expecting mercy as was standard in civilized warfare. A human destroyer altered course, accelerated, and rammed the crippled cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded. Or felt something he hadn't experienced in combat before: fear. The humans weren't fighting to win territory or to force surrender. They were fighting to kill. Every action was calculated to cause maximum damage, regardless of the cost to themselves. A transmission came through on emergency channels. It was broadcasting from Earth's surface. "Admiral, you must retreat. They have weapons you cannot defend against. The humans are willing to sacrifice everything to win. Please, before more die, retreat." Or wanted to argue, but another explosion rocked his flagship. A human missile had somehow penetrated their defensive screen. The warhead was unlike anything in databases. It released a cloud of nanomachines that began eating through the hull, converting the ship's own armor into more nanobots. "Seal the breach," Or ordered. "Vent that entire section to space." His crew, but the damage was done. The Eternal Conquest had lost a quarter of its mass. More reports flooded in. A boarding party had breached a human frigate. The human crew had sealed themselves in the reactor room and initiated a core overload. The boarding party, the frigate, and 2 nearby ships vanished in a nuclear fireball. Another vessel reported that human crew members were fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors, using tactics that seemed designed to cause maximum chaos. They would detonate grenades in their own ships, venting sections to space, killing themselves and the boarding parties together. They set traps using their own wounded as bait. They fought with a ferocity that made no sense. Or pulled up his strategic display. In just 2 hours, he'd lost 43 ships. The human fleet was down to 60 ships, but they showed no signs of wavering. More concerning, the automated defense systems were adapting. The drones were learning from each engagement, improving their tactics in real time. "Pull back to outer system," Or ordered. "Reform at Jupiter orbit." The fleet tried to retreat, but the humans pursued. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable. They harried the vessels like predators chasing wounded prey. Nuclear mines bracketed the retreat route. More ships died. By the time the survivors reached Jupiter or had lost 70 ships, 70, in less than 6 hours, the humans had lost 32, but they fought like each ship was worth 10 vessels. Or was preparing to regroup when new contacts appeared on sensors. Human reinforcements were arriving, not military ships but converted civilian vessels, cargo haulers with welded to their hulls, colony ships bristling with missile pods, even mining ships, their industrial equipment repurposed as weapons. The humans were mobilizing their entire civilization. A communication came through. Fleet Admiral's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but determined. "Admiral, or you've seen what happens when you attack us. This is your one chance to withdraw. Leave now and we'll let you go. Stay and we'll destroy every ship you have. We don't want this war, but we will finish it." Or looked at his tactical display. His fleet was battered, his warriors shaken. The humans had weapons that violated every standard of civilized warfare: suicide attacks, self-destructing ships, nanomachines, nuclear mines, automated killer drones, and behind it all, a willingness to sacrifice anything to achieve victory. He thought of warning, 10,000 years of warfare, every advancement forged in blood, a species that had nearly destroyed itself and learned from it. "All ships retreat to edge of system," or ordered. "Prepare for faster-than-light jump." Some of his captains protested or overrode them. "We're leaving, now, before they bring out worse weapons." As the fleet limped toward the system's edge, human ships shadowed them but didn't attack. They just watched, their weapons locked on target, making sure the invaders understood the message. The Armada jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving behind 73 destroyed ships and thousands of dead warriors. The invasion had lasted less than a day. On Earth, Fleet Admiral watched the enemy flee and allowed himself a moment of relief. Then he turned to assess the damage. 23,000 humans dead, 32 ships destroyed, billions of credits in damage to defensive installations. His second-in-command approached. "Admiral, casualties are being reported as light compared to projections." Nodded grimly. Light. 23,000 dead was light. But by the standards of human history, by the metrics of their own wars, it was barely a skirmish. The resource wars had killed millions. World War II had killed tens of millions. Humanity had learned to measure the cost of war in terrible ways. "Send a message to all civilian ships," ordered. "Thank them for their service. And get me a line to the United Earth Council. We need to discuss next steps." He looked at the tactical display, showing the retreating fleet. They would tell the galaxy what happened here. They would spread the word about what happened when someone attacked Earth. Good thought, let them tell everyone. Let the galaxy know that humanity wasn't prey. In the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council, representatives from 200 species gathered to hear the report. The chamber was ancient, carved from living crystal, designed to inspire awe and respect for the wisdom of elder civilizations. Today, it would bear witness to a different kind of lesson. Ambassador stood in the center of the hall, his crystalline body still showing cracks from the battle. Beside him, Admiral waited, his once proud bearing now hunched with defeat. Around them, the assembled species watched with curiosity and confusion. The hegemony had never called an emergency session before. Their military had never been defeated. The council speaker, unnamed, activated the recording systems. "The council recognizes Ambassador. You have requested this assembly to discuss the human question. Proceed." His voice carried through the chamber, translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "Honored council members, 3 cycles ago the hegemony made contact with the species known as humans. Following standard protocol, we offered them integration into our society. They refused. We deployed a standard conquest fleet. 200 warships, the same force that has successfully claimed 40 systems." He paused and the chamber remained silent. "We lost 73 ships in less than 1 planetary rotation. We retreated with our forces in disarray. The humans suffered minimal casualties by their own historical standards. We were defeated completely." The chamber erupted in noise. Species talking over each other, questioning, disbelieving. There were warriors. They didn't lose. The speaker called for order, and slowly the assembly quieted. A representative from a warrior species themselves spoke up. "This is impossible. We have seen human physiology reports. They are weak, soft-bodied creatures. How could they defeat forces?" Admiral or stepped forward. "We thought the same. We were wrong. The humans are not weak. They are the most dangerous species in known space, and we failed to recognize it because we measured danger by physical strength alone." He activated a holographic display, showing footage from the battle. The assembled species watched in growing horror as human ships employed tactics that violated every norm of civilized warfare. Suicide attacks, self-destructing vessels, weapons designed to maximize casualties regardless of the cost. "This is barbaric," someone shouted. "They fight without honor." Turned toward the voice. "They fight to win. Honor is a luxury of species who haven't spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing their own kind." He brought up Earth's historical records. The Council watched in silence as centuries of human warfare played out before them. The scale of violence was beyond anything most species had ever imagined. Wars that lasted generations, conflicts that killed millions, weapons of such horror that humans had banned themselves from using them. Studied the data, his herbivorous nature making the images particularly disturbing. "They fight each other, their own species." "Constantly," confirmed. "Until approximately 150 of their years ago, humanity was divided into hundreds of separate nations. They fought over resources, ideology, territory, religion, and sometimes for reasons that make no logical sense. They have a concept called spite, where they will destroy themselves to deny an enemy victory." More footage played. World War I's trench warfare, World War II's industrial slaughter, the nuclear standoff of the Cold War, the automated killing fields of the resource wars, each conflict more terrible than the last, each showing humanity's capacity for violence on a scale that shocked the galaxy. A philosopher, a species known for their pacifism, spoke quietly. How did they survive? How does a species endure such continuous violence without destroying themselves? "Because they're good at it," Or answered. "They've turned warfare into a science. Every conflict taught them new lessons, better tactics, more efficient weapons, superior strategies, and when they united, they didn't abandon this knowledge. They kept it. Every human advancement in medicine, communication, transportation, and technology was forged in warfare. Their entire civilization is built on a foundation of organized violence." Brought up more data. The humans have rules of war, the Geneva Conventions, the Hague Regulations, lists of things they agreed not to do to each other, prohibited weapons, protected targets, treatment of prisoners. "That seems civilized," observed hopefully. "It is," agreed. "But understand what this means. These rules exist because humans know exactly how horrible warfare can be. They've experienced it. They created weapons so terrible that they had to ban them, not because outsiders told them to stop, but because they horrified themselves. And yet, when they deemed it necessary, they broke their own rules. They used their banned weapons anyway when victory required it." The display showed human weapons development, chemical agents that melted living tissue, biological weapons designed to spread like plagues, nuclear devices that poisoned land for generations, and newer things, weapons developed for space warfare, nanomachines, AI-controlled drones, relativistic kinetic weapons, automated defense systems that could operate without human input. "When we attacked," Or continued, "the humans employed weapons they had developed for their own wars, weapons they considered too cruel to use against each other. They used them against us without hesitation." A military representative from the Dominion, a species with mandatory military service, asked the question others were thinking. What is the human military capability? Total force projection. Pulled up the data. Their active defense fleet consists of 87 military vessels, but this number is meaningless. Every human civilian ship can be converted to military use within days. Their entire solar system is a fortified position. Luna, their moon, houses weapons that could destroy a fleet. Mars holds garrison forces. They have automated defense platforms throughout their asteroid belt, nuclear mines, kinetic kill weapons, biological warfare agents. And that's just what we encountered. He paused, letting that sink in. Intelligence suggests they have weapons they didn't deploy, antimatter devices, planet killers, things they keep in reserve because using them would be, in their words, disproportionate. The humans have weapons they consider too powerful for routine combat. The council chamber fell silent. Species that had never known true war couldn't comprehend it. Species that had fought before understood the implication. The humans could have made the battle worse. Access the human database directly, scrolling through their history. He stopped on a document called the Nuclear Triad. They built enough weapons to destroy their own planet dozens of times. Why would any species do this? Deterrence, explained. The humans have a doctrine called mutually assured destruction. The idea that if they built enough weapons, no one would dare use them because everyone would die. They bet their entire species on this theory. And it worked. For decades, human nations aimed weapons at each other, fingers on triggers, and no one fired because everyone understood the cost. They're insane, someone muttered. They're survivors, corrected. They're a species that looked at extinction, at the real possibility of destroying themselves, and chose to step back. They united not because they stopped being violent, but because they recognized that their violence needed a new direction. Outward, not inward. Or activated another display. This is human civilian response to the invasion. Within hours, they converted cargo ships to military vessels. Mining ships became missile platforms. Colony vessels were armed with their entire population mobilized. They have a term for it, total war. The complete dedication of every resource to achieving victory. More footage showed human civilians working around the clock, producing ammunition, repairing ships, treating wounded. Not because they were forced, but because when threatened, humans united with terrifying efficiency. A trade representative spoke up, concerned about economic implications. What about human trade, their merchant fleet? Every merchant ship carries weapons, replied. Every human knows how to fight. They train their children in basic combat. They teach warfare in their schools not as history but as practical knowledge. Every human is a potential soldier. Was scrolling through more human documents. He stopped on something and his skin paled. They have plans for zombie apocalypses, for alien invasions, for artificial intelligence rebellions, for natural disasters, for economic collapse. They plan for every possible catastrophe. Because they've experienced most of them, said. Plagues killed millions of humans, they survived. Asteroids hit their planet, they survived. Ice ages, eruptions, nuclear near misses, economic depressions. They document everything, learn from it, and prepare for it to happen again. The council speaker called for order as discussions broke out across the chamber. What is the hegemony's recommendation regarding human contact? Admiral or stepped forward. Complete diplomatic engagement, trade agreements, cultural exchange, technology sharing, anything except military confrontation. We have already offered reparations for the attack. We have formally requested peace terms. The humans accepted with minimal conditions. They don't want conquest. They want to be left alone. And if they're not, someone asked, if another species attacks them, then that species will learn what we learned, or said grimly. The humans have a saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Their history is 10,000 years of warfare. Every species should know this before making contact. Pulled up one final document. The humans have another saying that I believe is important for this council to understand. See Parabellum. It's ancient, from one of their dead languages. It means, if you want peace, prepare for war. The humans don't hope for peace. They prepare for war constantly, and that preparation keeps the peace. He showed images of human children learning history. Every human child studies their wars. They learn about the trenches of World War I, the nuclear shadows of Hiroshima, the automated killing fields of the resource wars. They don't hide from their violent past. They teach it so it won't be repeated. But they remember every tactic, every weapon, every hard lesson learned in blood. Was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Finally, he spoke. I move that humanity be classified as an apex persistence predator species, diplomatic contact only, military engagement prohibited without council approval. The vote was unanimous. As the council session ended, species representatives gathered in small groups, discussing the implications. The humans were out there with their terrible weapons and their history of violence, but they weren't expanding aggressively. They weren't threatening neighbors. They just wanted to be left alone. Found studying human cultural data. What are you looking at? Their art, the replied. Their music, literature, films. Do you know what I find? Stories about preventing war, about sacrifice to protect others, about the cost of violence. They know what they are. They teach their children about peace while preparing them for war. Their paradoxes. They're human, said. That's what makes them dangerous. They can be peaceful or violent, cooperative or competitive, merciful or merciless. You never know which you'll face until you meet them. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. Trade ships carried the story. Diplomatic channels buzzed with reports. The humans had defeated the hegemony in a single day. More importantly, they'd done it without pursuing the retreating fleet. They'd shown restraint even in victory. Species that had been considering expansion toward human space quietly updated their maps. Aggressive civilizations took note and adjusted their strategies. Pirates who'd been raiding the edges of human territory suddenly found new hunting grounds elsewhere. Earth's merchant vessels began ranging farther into the galaxy. They carried goods and technology, always willing to trade. But every ship had weapons, and every crew knew how to use them. Other species learned to respect human traders, not from fear alone, but from recognition that the humans had earned their place. 6 months after the battle, attended a reception at Earth's orbital station. He watched humans mingling with alien species, sharing drinks and stories. They seemed so friendly, so peaceful, but he'd read their history. He knew what they were capable of. A human approached him, Fleet Admiral. They'd never met in person, only seen each other across communication channels during the battle. Ambassador said, extending his hand in the human greeting, I'm glad you survived. Carefully grasped the small, soft hand, so fragile, so weak, but he knew better now. As am I, Admiral. I wish we had met under better circumstances. So do I, agreed. For what it's worth, we didn't want that fight. But you were prepared for it, observed. Nodded, always. We learned a long time ago that hopping for peace isn't enough. You have to be ready to defend it. They stood together, watching the reception. Humans and aliens trading and talking, building relationships, peaceful, but could see the security personnel stationed discreetly around the room. He knew about the weapons hidden in the station structure, the defensive systems on standby, the fleet on patrol just outside scanner range. The humans prepared for war so they could have peace. It was the most human thing imaginable. As prepared to leave, stopped him. Ambassador, I want you to know something. We're not monsters. We don't enjoy violence, but we're very, very good at it when necessary. Every species in the galaxy should know that, not as a threat but as a fact. Understood. I've made sure they know, Admiral. Your history speaks for itself. Good, said. Because the best way to win a war is to make sure it never starts. If everyone knows what we can do, maybe we'll never have to do it again. Left Earth orbit with new respect for the small, soft creatures who'd beaten his people so thoroughly. The galaxy was learning to live with humanity. learning that strength came in many forms, learning that the most dangerous predators often looked harmless. The humans continued their expansion into the galaxy, always trading, always talking, always preferring peace. But behind every diplomat was a history of warfare. Behind every merchant vessel was a warship's weapons. Behind every smile was the knowledge that humans could be pushed into war, but never defeated in it. History had taught them well, and the galaxy was learning to listen.